So at the very beginning of this Nike project, we were actually given a NURBS surface model of this part, which was a very clean model to start working with. This model was created from a 3D scan that was then stitched into surfaces, but we actually ended up going back into a mesh for this project, and I'll show you a couple reasons why. Upon some initial examination of this model, we did find a couple small issues. For example, here we have a missing surface highlighted with some small gaps shown between the surfaces, and we also have a little patch over here, for example, where surfaces don't quite line up. And we have some extremely high hopes for this project, and we really want the best possible surface finish. I think I could have achieved that using these surfaces, but instead I decided to change this part over to a mesh so I could use Mastercam's mesh tools to make as perfect a surface finish as possible. If I turn on level 2, we can see the resulting mesh body. Again, I highlighted the treble areas. Let's focus on how I cleaned up the red one. I'd like to isolate this red treble area by trimming our mesh to this chain. Let's open Trim to Chain, select our target mesh, and select our target chain. Let's flip sides so we trim the correct side. We've now isolated the small area of the model, meaning all our calculations will run much faster. This trim resulted in two small bodies. I don't need this small one over here, so let's explode the mesh and run split disjointed mesh to separate them. I can now delete the red body and focus all my efforts on this green one. Before I can patch this hole, I first must make sure the mesh has some uniform facets. On the View tab, let's toggle Mesh Facet Edges. We can see here that this mesh has some significant variation in the size of its facets, so we can run the Refine tool to smooth that out. Mesh, Refine. We can select our target mesh here. Mastercam gives us the current edge length of these facets, so here I'm going to enter 0.2. For now, let's start with one iteration and see what the results are. The resulting mesh is a little bit more uniform than the original one, but I think we need to add a few more iterations to get something perfect. Now if I zoom in, all these mesh facets are extremely uniform, and I can move forward with some smoothing. When I'm trying to smooth a mesh, I find it easiest to turn off the facet edges because that helps me really see the contour and the organic shape of that mesh. On the mesh toolbar, we can select Smooth Area, we can select our target mesh. We're given 4 different methods of smoothing. It's difficult to say which of these 4 methods is going to be the best one for us. Ultimately, it's going to be some trial and error to see which one does the best. Minimize curvature seems to wash the model out a little bit more than I'd like. Minimize area really smooths out the model a little bit too aggressively. And in my opinion, average seems to do the best. It leaves the majority of the contour still in the model, but smooths out the high spots. Let's click OK here and move forward with some of these repairs. One tool that I really like to use to help show trouble spots in a mesh is the Fill Holes utility. If I run Fill Holes and select this mesh, all these red areas highlight areas of the model that are not healed smooth, meaning there's a gap or there's an overlap or there's some trouble that needs to be fixed there. So even though it looks like there's only one hole here, there are actually a few seams that we need to zip together. Instead of using fill holes to fill these holes, I prefer to use fill holes to mark the problem areas, where ultimately I'm going to come in and use Modify Mesh Facets Repair. What Repair does is it will delete the problem facets and heal them with something new. So let's start with this small selection here and say OK. We can see it healed over the trouble spot, but it left kind of a different surface finish. You can see a different contour here, so we have to kind of come back and smooth that out. We can say OK, open Smooth Area, select some facets, maybe a little bit larger of a region this time. Say OK. Again, this is going to be some trial and error. Let's step through some of these different routines and see which one works the best. In my opinion, minimized curvature really makes the most natural organic shape out of what we've just repaired. From this point, we're simply repeating the steps of repair and smooth until we get rid of all the problem areas. Let's run one more repair on some of these sections over here. We can simply make our selection, say OK. We see the area that has been repaired, and then run Smooth Area with a large enough selection for smoothing. Click Preview, and we see a nice organic smooth shape where there once was a seam. Now that we see the routine we need to follow to repair this mesh, let's take a look at the hole in the mesh. Once more, we're going to run Modify Mesh Facets and Repair. This time we're going to select maybe a little bit too much of the model. We can come back and right-click and drag to unselect the areas we don't need to focus on. So basically, we're going to focus our selection around the hole. We'll say OK. And we can see that Repair did clean up that hole, but again, it does need to be smoothed. So say OK here, run Smooth Area once more. Select by Facets. Again, I like to maybe over-select. I can come back to right-click and drag to deselect the areas I don't want to work on. Say OK. Click Preview. And instantly, we have something that is completely organic, smooth, and flowing with the model. So now you can see how easy it is to repair a mesh. I think it's possible I could have repaired the surfaces, but repairing a mesh in all these places and getting a perfect organic model is very easy.